Hello, guys. Welcome back to the Interlix Podcast, episode 15. Today, I have the pleasure to bring you guys Robert Reiss, the CEO of the CEO Forum Group, the first person to have interviewed 1,000 top CEOs, and the person who has the #1 podcast for CEOs as well. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Pleasure, Sebastian.
Yeah, so that was a crazy introduction, to say the least. But let's start from the beginning. Can you tell me a bit more about growing up and more specific about your high school?
Yeah, well, I'll start growing up. I grew up in New York City, and what we were talking about earlier about how safe it is or not, when I was 7 years old, I used to go on the train by myself. But it was a very different time then, and I was able to go to the United Nations school, which was really interesting to meet all people.
Oh, wow.
But then you asked me about high school.
Yeah.
So high school, it was in a unique high school called Music and Art. So everyone there was from music or art. And everything in New York was city and museums and music. And it was really vibrant. And so while I was a senior in high school, they actually made a movie about our high school. The movie is called Fame, and then it became a top TV show as well.
Oh, wow. And like, in terms of just growing up, like, do you have any specific memories about just your upbringing more than anything that defined you and made the person that you are today?
Yes. By the way, can I bring in a story about Fame?
Let's talk about Fame.
Then we're going to go into the upbringing as well.
Yeah.
So you know what? I'll answer the upbringing first.
Yeah.
When I was 5 years old, my grandfather sat me in the dining room and he said, "Robbie, my boy, I want you to look up the most important word in the English language." And so he had me get a big dictionary. In those days, there was no internet. And I looked up the word reliability. So I'm looking up RUL. I don't know how to spell it. But he said, that is the most important word in the English language. And can I tell you, to this day, everything I do, if I keep a promise, I say I'm going to be there at 2 o'clock, I'm there at 2. I don't do gotchas with CEOs. Everything I do, I follow exactly what I promise. And that word, one, reliability, is why, like I would say, well over 500 CEOs I know personally. And all the relationships are probably built on that one word of reliability.
No, definitely. I think like being reliable is one of the most important things, especially in business. But now going back to the Fame.
Yeah, there you go. So this movie. So there we were as seniors, and I learned some lessons from this. I was in one thing they were saying to us, you could have your own scene if you want. And they would film us. And in those days, I actually could play harmonica through my nose, which no one else could do. And everyone said, "Reiss, do your harmonica thing. You'll get your own scene." And they give me money. But I was too into being, I'm 17, I'm cool. And I didn't do it. To this day, would I love it if I had my own scene in that movie about, playing harmonica, but I didn't. And then one other thing happened. So they were going around and they said, "Well, everyone, we want you to look clean cut." And in those days, they I had this mustache, and they go around the group and they say, "You need to shave." And the next guy say, "You need to shave." But he said, "I only use this Norelco 30. And the producer goes, "Buy it," to one of his people. So we were coming up to me and I was so concerned, Sebastian. I'm like, am I going to shave my mustache that took me all these months and months and months to grow, or not be in the movie? And they come up to me and he looks at me, he goes, "Okay, you're fine. Next person." And so at first I was relieved, but then I realized the mustache wasn't as prominent as I thought.
Yeah.
And so I think the lessons you learn from all of these is you may have one perception when you're a certain age, but you have to think of the future and how it would impact you as well.
No, yeah, definitely. I think everybody, especially in high school, they thought they look cool, they look great. And then looking back, you're like, oof, I shouldn't wear that. Or I shouldn't have, have that hairstyle in specific. I used to have like the little kids with the whole round thing and my hair like put down, like emo.
Well, I bet you look good.
I didn't look the best, yeah. But okay, so, you grew up in New York City and you went to high school in New York. Then after high school, can you go more in detail? So you went to where you went to college, and then maybe a bit more about your college experience.
Well, one thing happened in college. I read this book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And Napoleon Hill was very interesting because in 1908, there was a guy named Andrew Carnegie, who was the richest man in the world at the time, maybe second to Rockefeller, I'm not sure, but they were close. And Andrew Carnegie said, I want you, Napoleon Hill, to interview the top most successful people in the entire world. I'm going to introduce you to all of them, and you find out the tenets, the secrets of their success. And this whole book was about what he found from those people. And I was at the time saying, he has the best job in the world. This Napoleon Hill, he gets to interview the top people in the world. Little did I realize a couple of decades later, that would be my job.
Yeah. No, wow. And Andrew, I love him as an entrepreneur. That's actually one of the entrepreneurs I follow the most, especially, after the whole empire that he created, he gave back at the end. Coming from an immigrant background as well. I love Andrew, so it's great. So, can you tell me a bit, before going to create the CEO Forum, can you tell me a bit more about your experience, your career? Where were you working before starting this company?
Yeah, so I worked in New York City, and I worked in real estate. Then I worked for a company, Dale Carnegie Training, that my grandfather had taken the course, Dale Carnegie course with Dale Carnegie himself years ago. So I was always really interested into that, into success, how people succeed. But I will tell you, there was one conversation that I had that really struck me and helped shape the person that I am today. And someone said to me, maybe I was 22 years old, and he said, do you want to meet Henry Baker? And I'm like, who's Henry Baker? He said, the most famous real estate person. He's 96 years old. He sells buildings, but he sells buildings like the Empire State Building, the General Motors Building. And I said, sure. So I went and I met him, and he was this guy, like this old crotchety guy, and he's on the phone. He's like, what's the rent, bro? Too expensive. Forget it. I said, okay, come here, kid. What do you want to know? I said, well, what's the key to success? He said, never burn a bridge. And from that day, that indelibly stuck in my mind that the key is you have to honor every relationship. And that's really when I started the CEO show. My whole goal was to honor every single relationship and to aggregate as much content as I could. That was my whole business.
No, wow. And definitely when it comes to reputation is something that it takes years to build, but you can break it in a second. And then, also one of my mentors told me the same stuff. At the end of the day, your reputation, who you are, your word is the most important thing. Because if you, like you said, if you burn a bridge, then everybody's going to know in a sense.
Never know when that person will become a critical person in your life.
And when it comes to before starting the business, were you in a specific, let's say, I know you like sales, you did a bit of sales before. Do you think that impacted you before going into starting the CEO show and all of that? Do you think that was something that built you?
Well, you know what I could say, Sebastian? If anyone, you're listening, the number one skill to learn is sales. Nothing is more important than that. And I see Sheikha over there smiling because she's top sales for you. But the reason is, anyone, if you are a lawyer, you want to join a law firm, the first thing they're going to say is, what is your book of business? If you are an investment banker, they're going to say, what have you done? So sales, nothing is more important. But there's a big mistake how people think about sales. They think about someone when they're pushy, that they're being good. Oh, you're a real salesperson. Yeah. It's the exact opposite. A great salesperson helps someone think through and solves problems they never knew they had. So I'm going to tell, I know you have this huge audience of, hundreds of thousands of people. I'm going to share, here are the 4 steps of selling. And I probably have gone through these steps probably 5 times every single day I use these. The first is trust. You have to build a trust, and you have to explain who you are and why you're relevant in the context of that person. Who are you? Who am I in this context? The second thing, once you build that trust, is uncovering needs. And you find out what they want and why they want it. But you have to get to the systemic core of what's really important to them. And the biggest mistake people make is they jump into the third step, which is provide the solutions. And it's like you go to buy a car and someone says, oh, I think you'll want this one. Or they call you telemarketing on the phone. They assume you want something. The biggest mistake people make is going to solutions before they've uncovered needs. So once you uncover needs and you clarify with them, this is what I'm hearing. This is what you want. This is why you want it. Is that right? Did I get it wrong? Once they say that, you say, okay, well, here's what we could do together. And the fourth part is really just collaboration.
Yeah.
I go through that day in, day out. And anyone who's starting, if you learn one thing, learn sales.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that it's like the one closest to entrepreneurship in the sense that you control your career, because most of the sales positions is by commission. So it's the one where you, in a sense, have that authority over your work. And that's one of the reasons why I love sales. I was thinking of getting into sales before I became an entrepreneur. I was looking into tech sales, and then, just Babson just pushed me into starting business. But yeah, I think sales is magnificent.
And by the way, when you mentioned commission, I remember at one point I was on salary and they said, we want you to go into commission instead.
Yeah.
And at first I fought against it, but then I said, I'll do it. After 1 year, they said, well, could we just take you back to salary because you're making so much more money now?
Yeah.
And they even had to give me something. They said, well, if I do this, you'll buy me a car. And I wanted this red Mazda Miata, and they ended up getting me that too, which was cool. So you could do commission. You have to prove yourself. It's exactly what being an entrepreneur is.
No.
Exactly, definitely. And one thing that you said that for me was great is that you cannot sell if there's no need.
Absolutely. And if there's no need and you don't find it, don't sell. Focus on the relationship. Be a good person to that person. Help them out.
Yeah. Now just going, from where did the idea of the CEO forum came, the CEO show? Can you tell me more about starting the business, where the idea came from, and more?
Well, it started as the CEO show. The word CEO, where that came from, I was at a black tie event. And I just went up. I saw a guy, his name is Herb Kelleher. He was the founder of Southwest Airlines, which was the most successful airline of any in the world, the best customer service, the best everything. And so I just went up to him. I said, you don't know me. My name's Robert Reiss, but I'm really interested in what makes a company great. And at the time, I was reading one book a week on what makes a company great. And he said, well, it's not how fast you turn around the plane. It's not what the fuel costs. It's when you see someone in the elevator and you say, oh, how was Patricia's soccer game this weekend? I said, oh, it's communication. He said, communication? And then he said something that stopped me. He said, it's love. So I probably said something highly articulate like, huh? and then he said these words. He said, love, unleashing the individual spirit of each person. And I went back to my table. I wrote down those words, and I was at the time managing like 3 people. I tried to manage everyone to unleashing their spirit. To this day, that's still how I manage everyone. Yeah. My goal is to unleash their spirit, and everything in work works out. And what I realized right there was that one CEO conversation, just one, could impact your world, because that changed the way I looked at everything of trying to unleash. So that put the seed of the importance of a CEO. Now, it took me 15 years later to start the word show, because you asked CEO show. So I was driving on the LIE, which is Long Island Expressway, bumper to bumper traffic. And I'm going crazy. This is before there was Sirius radio. This is before there was iPhones, anything. And I just wanted to find one radio station on success, on how I could be more successful, who I could learn from. There's absolutely nothing. So I said to myself right there, I said, what if I started interviewing really successful people? That would be cool. I could learn from them. So it was out of curiosity this happened.
Oh, wow.
And then from that curiosity, somehow, I guess, back in my mind came back that conversation with Herb Kelleher. And I said, why don't I interview CEOs? They understand 2 things, personal success and business models, or they couldn't become CEOs. And so I said, I'm going to start the CEO show right on the LA. The idea came in.
Oh wow! So traffic made you come from an idea.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but what for me is the most impressive is that, like, if you see now today the social media, everybody's talking about personal development, and now everybody has podcasts interviewing people. But you were like, if not the first one of the first one that
There was no CEO shows there. It was the first one. Everyone yelled at us nuts. It said, "You're going to interview CEOs?"
yeah, wow, no, so that's pretty impressive that you were like the first one that kind of realize that, like, the need, because now if you put on the radio show, there's so many shows about personal development, about how to become how to get healthier. But how was the radio shows?
Well, I'm not gonna say get healthier.
Yeah.
I don't think CEOs have much to teach you in that.
Yeah. And how was, like, when it comes like to the radio shows back then, just out of curiosity, what were like the radio shows that you were hearing, just like music or
Music, sports, news, nothing exciting.
Okay, so for the people watching the podcast, can you tell a bit more about the CEO show, what it encompasses, what it is?
Okay, so it started off as just a radio show. The CEO show was the name. It was only out of one station, WGCH 1490. That's for Greenwich, Connecticut. And it was hard in the early days because I didn't know any CEOs. I knew nothing about radio or anything whatsoever in there.
Yeah.
But it's right now today, it's four properties. One is the radio show, which, as you referenced, was the number one podcast for CEOs in America. And we're on 61 radio stations, air over 100 times a week with over 600,000 listeners a week.
Yeah.
The second is the magazine, and that goes the top 10,000 CEOs in America, and also the top, all the governors and all the senators. And that's really just capturing the concepts, because a radio show could be ephemeral, but then if it's in magazine, people could take it on their private jet. They could read it when they want. Third is the CEO summits. So those we do once a quarter, we do a summit. We've done 16 of those. And then the fourth is the CEO digital.
Okay, awesome. And who was the first CEO that you got to the CEO show? Can you talk about the story about getting the first one?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Well, the first one, I went to the radio station and I said, well, could I do a CEO show? They said, yeah, we'll give you Friday 4 to 5. I said, well, wait, I don't know any CEOs. I don't know how to do this. So I said, why don't we start in 3 months? So we started in 3 months, and I had no idea who I would interview whatsoever. And I went to one business meeting. Someone said, oh, it's breakfast for Mormons, and you go and you'll hear speakers. And I went there, and I heard David Neilman speak. And David was the founder of JetBlue, which was an amazing company. Coincidentally, like Herb Kelleher, my first CEO I spoke with, not interviewed, also a great airline. And so I went up to him and I said, I'm starting a radio show. Would you like to be on it? And he says, sure, why not? I said, it's a CEO show. He said, call Carol Archer. So I called her. And then while I was there was another guy who was speaking. Jim Quigley was the CEO of Deloitte. And I went up to him and I said, well, I'm starting a radio show and David Neilman's already going to be on it. I thought you might want to be on it. He says, sure. And then I just start finding out everywhere. And I asked people, what's the best hotel? I said, oh, the Ritz-Carlton. So I just cold call. I cold call the CEO of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, get him on the show. Then I said, oh, Estee Lauder. I cold call them. And before you know it, we had all these top CEOs. And then they came to me and they said, Robert, your show is really popular. You're just on one radio station. We want to take you national. I didn't know anything about radio. I said, what does that mean? They said, nothing. You just give us the radio show. We distribute it throughout the nation. And that's what happened.
Oh wow! No, that's impressive though. How just by one yes, it turned into many yeses.
And that's what happens to all the entrepreneurs in their business. Same with you. You get a client, you teach them right, you do amazing work, and now you get a referral to another client.
When it comes to, you interview entrepreneurs, CEOs, and you're a founder yourself, so you know the struggle about starting a company. So when it comes to, and like the most difficult part is always the beginning. So can you tell me about like what was kind of like the most difficult part of starting the business itself at the beginning of your career?
Yeah, it was like sort of coming home, telling my wife I was a sole income provider, Well, I had an amazing job, and I was doing super well, and I'm giving this all up, and I'm starting this show. That was not easy, and even harder than that was at the end of my first year when I made 90% less money. That's 90% less money my first year, because I had no idea what to do, how to monetize. I had no clue of any of the business. So that was very hard, because and you call up the mortgage company and you say, well, you know what? I'm starting a business, so could you hold off? I can't pay the mortgage right now. They're not really too interested. Anyone. So it is very hard, like everyone, but you have to stick with it.
Yeah, no, definitely. First year is always tough. Second year is always tough. I have heard of entrepreneurs that in their 8th year, they started making money, which for me it's crazy. You waited 8 years and then you see the fruits of your work. Because most of the people that want to be entrepreneurs, they might work 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, and then they give up because they don't see results or they don't think it's worth it. But there's entrepreneurs and founders that work for years, countless of years, and then they see the fruits. So it's all about being patient, like you said, and keep going. And talking more about being an entrepreneur, was there any specific challenges that you were facing when you were wanting to scale up your business, or anything in particular that you want to talk to the audience about?
Yeah. When I started the magazine, I knew nothing about magazines. I had a show on the radio. It became pretty popular. People really liked it a lot. They loved meeting. I built all these relationships. I knew nothing about it. So I had at the time, I had a guy who was great at this stuff, and we just made this magazine. And then when people saw it, they gave this comment. They said, the content is great, but the whole way the magazine looks, it looks like Christmas, or it's like a kid, something like a 10-year-old kid would make. It was the worst design ever, and it was really humbling. But from there, we hired a designer who created all of our things, our logo, and changed the whole format. But it was a big embarrassment. And when I first sold the magazine to people, I'd never sold the magazine. I knew nothing about it. Saying, yeah, you're going to be in this great magazine. You're going to be with all these CEOs. And then when they got it, it was tough because it did not look good. However, the one good thing was they said, the content, we love the interviews.
Yeah.
So you got to stick with that. And then I had to call up all the people who are in the magazine and say, we're redesigning it.
Also. And I think one thing that you said is that you need good branding to be able to sell. Because you can have the best content, but if your branding, your marketing is not on point, it makes it harder to sell. So that's something that even me myself, I learned, the better the branding was, the better the marketing was, it was so much easier to sell. And that's something that entrepreneurs need to know. Like, you can be the best salesperson, but if your marketing is a 0, you're not going to be selling.
You could have the best product, and if you don't know how to sell, forget it. And if you can't get the market out there, forget it. So you have to focus on selling, but you have to get the brand and make sure you get a really good brand name.
Yeah.
We got lucky. The CEO show, we're the only one out there, and it's the perfect name.
It's for the CEO.
Right. It's a lot of people name it after themselves. Oh, this is the Reiss show, and no one knows Reiss.
And Robert, so you have been, running your business for 18 years. In these 18 years, what has been the lowest point for you? Because obviously being an entrepreneur is hard.
We got to keep going back to the lowest point. Sebastian, it's all about confidence and belief. You have a purpose in life, and if you have it, you are going to have low points all the time. Something else I mentioned, my grandfather, who told me the most important word, reliability. He also said in life, if you're on the peak of a mountain, if you want to get to the next peak, what do you have to go through first?
Yeah.
The valley. That's constantly. And everything in life, success is not a straight line. Everything you go up, you learn skills, you become better and better. And then you're like, oh, how do I do this? And then all of a sudden you figure it out and you go to the next level. It's ups and downs. So it's constant.
No, yeah, definitely. Yeah, more like the lowest point is just because a lot of entrepreneurs, they need to go through a dark valley to be able to see light.
Could I tell you an example of one of these? When you talk about going through dark valleys, dark points, one of the secrets that people don't know about success is if you go through that challenge, hidden in that challenge is your next greatest treasure. So you have to go through that hard part. Here's an example. My friend Peter Cuneo, so he was CEO of a company called Marvel. They went bankrupt. It was worth 96 cents a share. They had no idea what they were going to do. They didn't even have any money. They had some computers. They didn't have real estate, corporate offices, nothing. But they said, what are we going to do? How do we succeed? We have no way out. But because their backs, Sebastian, were against the wall, they had gone bankrupt, they knew nothing. They said, what do we have? What are assets? They said, well, we have these IP characters. And I think they had about 700 of them. And one of them was this guy, Spider-Man. And they said, why don't we make a Spider-Man movie? But they didn't have money. So they go with Universal, with Sony. They do joint partnerships with them and say, we'll give the people, you make the movie. After they did 17 movies, they learned the whole business of movies and they raised $562 million. They built their own studio. And from there, they continued to build movies and they're able to sell to Disney a decade later for $54 a share. From 96 cents to $54. The secret that they went through, like you said, Sebastian, that dark time. And that dark time, by having their back against the wall, taught them, hey, you got to try something new. And that's where they came up with the creative idea.
No, yeah, definitely. When you have no other choice but to figure out, you're going to figure out. If there's no,
when you said it perfect.
Yeah.
Sebastian, when you have no choice but to figure out, you're going to figure out. You should like that book.
Exactly. I should write a book after this. But, one thing that for me was super interesting was that you started this business at 45. So can you tell me more about, starting the business later on in your career? Because me, myself, I'm only 23. I started a company at 21. I started young. But for you at 45 to take this big step into entrepreneurship, can you tell me more about how did it feel? What was the transition for you?
It's a little bit scary, but I think that everyone has what you would call their purpose in life. And you know it when you know it. And if that's it, you go with it and you make it happen. Many of the greatest successes happened later in life. There's this guy I interviewed, his name was Bernie. And Bernie was the CEO of Handy Dandy hardware store in California. Doesn't sound like much. And all of a sudden, he's 50 years old, he gets fired. Doesn't sound good for Bernie, does it? But he has an idea. And when his back is against the wall, he said, let me try something. And his idea was this big dream of this big store where you could buy anything. And so he just raised the money with a guy, Ken Langone, and he started a company called the Home Depot. And for the first 19 years, Bernie was the CEO of the Home Depot. And he told me, he said, you know what I'm proudest of, Robert? He said, I had made over 3,000 millionaires. And it was just because of a dream he started late in life. So wherever you are, if you're 23, go for it. If you're 45 and you have a different song in your arsenal, sing that new tune.
Awesome. I love that. I think that's such a great quote. And yeah, it is different for people. And some people are later in life, some people are young in life. Something that I was reading, actually, I read a lot, and I was seeing that most of the successful startups are for people that are after the 40s. So sometimes people think about startups, they think about Mark Zuckerberg, young people, college, but actually no, most of the successful startups are from people that already are in their 40s, who already have years of experience in their career. And that was something that, made me have a different perspective more than anything. But talking about CEOs, founders, you have interviewed thousands of them.
Not thousands, 1,200.
1,200 of them. So can you tell me one in specific that was your favorite, like your favorite radio show, or like you're like, okay, this was the best one so far?
Well, that'd be really hard because there were so many good. I'll tell you one though, who was of great interest. So this guy, Ralph de la Vega, and Ralph, when he was like 10 years old, he was living in Cuba, and Castro came in, and they're going to kick them out, and the whole family was going to go to America. But when they got to the airport, they said 5 words: only the boy can go. So they're like, well, what do we do? They send Ralph to Florida. They didn't know in Miami anyone. They found a friend of a friend. You'll stay for the weekend. We'll see you next week, and we'll come by. Well, that week turned out to be 4 years, from maybe he was 10 till he was 14. He said, I hate the food because they're giving me peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I wanted pork. It was terrible. I didn't speak the language. I knew nothing, but I knew that under every obstacle is a hidden opportunity. So he worked very hard, became like an engineer. He worked for AT&T, became the CEO of AT&T Mobility. And one day a guy comes up to him and says, I want to meet with you. And they meet in a hotel room. And the guy says, you got to sign these NDAs and everything. I'm creating this new type of phone. And you created a phone called the Rocker. The Rocker was a huge failure in business. It was the first phone that had music on it, but it was a disaster. But this guy said, I know you know radio stacking. I want you to use this radio stacking to help me build something. And that was the first iPhone.
Wow. Oh, wow.
And you know how Ralph knew it was great? Ralph said, well, where's the stylus? Now, you may not know this, Sebastian, but years ago, you wrote with something on your little phone. That was the stylus. And he said, that's your stylus. Steve Jobs said that to him. And Ralph said, wow, this is going to be big. So that interview I loved because it showed he came from humble beginnings. He overcame the challenges and used all of these to create something that was great. So if anyone was to ask you the question, did Fidel Castro have anything to do with the founding of the iPhone? The answer is actually yes.
It did. So Robert, you have been interviewing so many CEOs throughout the last 80 years. Is there a specific common trait that you have seen between the great CEOs?
There are several common traits. One is they have this sense of urgency, this burning desire to succeed. And no matter what it takes, if they're fortunate enough to find an obstacle and identify it, they're going to use that obstacle as a differentiation point and use that to tee off and grow their business. But here's a big thing about CEOs. CEOs got there for a reason. They want to share their story. They are so eager to share how they became successful, all the challenges they had to overcome. Frankly, the problem is media doesn't want to hear that. Media wants to put them in a box, and media wants to embarrass them many times. So because of that, I changed everything I do. I have principles that I follow that I don't capitulate on.
Yeah.
And one of them is no gotchas, which means I'm not there to try to embarrass a CEO and tell them, oh, you did this wrong, you did this wrong.
Yeah.
What I want to do instead is I want to identify one great thing that they've done, because everyone's done something wrong.
Yeah.
You've done things wrong, right, Sebastian?
Everybody.
Okay, and everybody. You put on camera,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But so instead, what I want to do is identify one thing that they do really well. One what I call a transformative. I wrote the book, The Transformative CEO, McGraw-Hill, 2012, and it's about unique practices. One unique practice that they have.
Awesome. And a question that, just came from the top of my head is that when it comes to interviewing these great CEOs, do you see a difference between somebody that, created a company, was an entrepreneur, and then obviously they became the CEO of their own company? Is that those CEOs different than a CEO that just, in a sense, climb up the corporate ladder? Have you seen difference between that, or is very similar?
Complete difference. I have such respect. I used to have to cold call everyone, but now I get 30 to 40 people, CEOs, reach out to me each week to want to interview them. And when I find someone who is actually the founder as well as the CEO, I jump on it. Because if they built a big business, they had to go through, there's 3 main phases. First is, how do you come up with the idea and build it so it becomes a business? Second is, how do you scale it? And that's a whole different skill. So they've been successful at both. The third one is, how do you grow a mature business? So that's three completely different skills. So many people, they move up how to build mature businesses. But if I find someone who's built a business from scratch and grew it, I love that.
Yeah. And I guess I guess it has happened to you, but you probably learned so many things from these interviews that then you were going back to your own business and implemented them.
All the time.
All the time. And is there like a one big lesson that you have learned over these past years, just interviewing CEOs?
Well, that's why I wrote that book. There's a lot of lessons.
Yeah.
But one thing I will say is you have to be a continuous learner. If you stop learning, you stop growing. You can't do well. And I remember once I was interviewing John Mackey. He founded Whole Foods. And he was showing me how he reads books. He does the same way I do. He yellow highlights, then he writes in pen, then he folds certain pages. And I said, well, what do you do? He says, Robert, I believe every person in life you're going to learn from. You meet someone, you may learn like, oh, I don't want to make the mistakes that they've made, or I do want to learn this one thing. But you have to be a continuous learner. That is the one thing.
Wow. Continuous learning, always learning.
Yeah. That happened by mistake for me, by the way, continuous learning.
Yeah. No, wow. It's super interesting. Yeah. Because it's true. Like I see some founders that they just focus so much on the business, or they just get like themselves in the operation so much that they forget to go outside and learn. Hey, how can I scale up the business?
They also forget about their family and their life, and they become siloed. And that's not good. You have to keep a balance in your life.
And how you have interviewed so many CEOs and yourself, how do you keep balance? Like, because it is something hard, especially if you are in the first couple of years, you might be putting the extra hours in to scale the business. But how can you balance business in a sense?
What you have to do is you have to make sure within every week you've built in personal things. You call it spiritual or whatever things that you want to build in different things into your life. Family time with friends, with community. You have to put those as rocks that can't almost put them in your calendar, because you're going to be nonstop. And you have to make sure that you're doing them all at the same time. And then it comes together.
Interesting. And, going back to you mentioned a book that you have written. So can you tell me more about your book, what it is about? Maybe the audience can learn a bit more. Maybe even buy the book if it's available. So
yeah. Well, now you could get everything for free, right?
Yeah.
So after I had interviewed a lot of CEOs at that point, I read this one book, How to Become a CEO, by this guy Jeffrey Fox. And I said, I love this book. It gets it right, because I know what being a CEO is. It's not that many things I know in life, but that I know. Like golf, I may wear the suspenders, but I ain't that good. But I love it, and I try. But so I read the book, I Google him, and I find somehow his phone number's on the internet, and I say, hi, I just read your book. I love this book. Where do you live? He goes, I'm in Connecticut. I said, oh, me too. And so it's like the very next morning we went out for breakfast. I take him out, and we said, let's write a book together on the findings from all of these great CEOs. And so my job was to get all the CEOs. I knew a ton of CEOs, and I knew ones who have done great things. And his job, he's written all these books, is to put it all together in the book. And so that became the Transformative CEO that in 2012 McGraw-Hill produced. And I will say, it's a good book, but I think what's more important than the book was one of the lessons. And one of the big findings was that any CEO, whatever industry you're in, do you know where you go for great ideas? Or other industries. So when you go out to a restaurant, let's say like you're in the staffing business, right? You go to the restaurant and you say, they served me this way, had this customer interface. How can I use this in the staffing business? And you have this unique model where, you go maybe to Argentina and you bring people, so it's the same hour, but you get things at a fraction of the cost. You might learn something from, maybe you go in an Uber drive and the Uber driver tells you something, or maybe you go and you buy something at a retail store and you say, I like how that interacted, or I like how they do the deal. That's where you learn. You're always going to learn from somewhere.
Oh yeah, definitely. No, I think that's so important. I even learned, one of my mentors is in the roofing industry, which is totally different. But I have learned so much from because the principles are very similar and they can be transcribed into different businesses. The only way is always that you have to kind of mold it towards your specific industry. And now talking about, can you tell me more about what does the future hold for CEO Forum Group and what you're looking to build in the next couple years, months?
My favorite question, Sebastian. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And the reason is because I have a big dream. I have something that can impact the whole world in a very positive way, and that is to democratize success. Yeah. See, we have fortunately by now we built the largest CEO content library in the whole world. So we've all of this content over here, and then there are millions and millions of entrepreneurs and executives who want to learn, who want to become top CEOs. So what we're going to do is open up all of this content at a fraction of the cost. And so it's really cheap that anyone could afford to do that. And they could learn at any time, and they could listen to any CEO interview, and they could learn from any CEO, and you just look up a topic, so that's what we want to do. We want to democratize success.
No, I think that's the best way to do it, because if you want to have a private consultation with one of the CEOs, first, I really think they're probably going to say no to you. And second of all, if they say yes, it's going to probably be $10,000 an hour.
Yeah. So here, all you do is you go to ceoshow.com. That's pretty easy. You just go there and there's access to anything. And my real dream is to get that all these people could be successful. Because think about, if we could get 10 million people to become successful, now that's 10 million families who are successful. Then all the people who are working for them, that's millions more. And then all of their vendors. We can build success to the world and make people throughout the entire world in all the different 200 countries become more successful. And that's my purpose in life.
Oh, wow. I think that's beautiful. And I always say, myself, I come from very humble beginnings. I was an immigrant that came from Ecuador, grew up in a top neighborhood. And one of the things I saw growing up, of the reason why many people stay in the system, is because of the lack of knowledge. And I think by what you're doing, you're giving knowledge to everybody. Because I know many peers of mine that were smarter than me, they were more hardworking than me, but because of the lack of knowledge, they didn't even know how to apply to college. They didn't even know that you could start a business if you were an immigrant. There's so many different things, and the lack of knowledge is one of the things that I have seen from my own experience that is what stops many people from being successful. And that's kind of like the goal. And so, I think that's great.
Well put.
And one question for you, Robert, what does it mean to be a CEO for you?
It's really an honor, because you have a responsibility. A CEO's job is just 6 words. After interviewing, all these CEOs, I could say it's just 6 words. To get from here to there. To do that, you have to define what your current reality is, and then you have to have the vision and figure out how to get there. So it's such an honor, because you get to help improve the world, democratize success, and these people who you work with, and you get to help their world be better. You allow people as a CEO. I'm able to take these great CEOs and share their stories throughout the world. That is an honor, man, Sebastian. That is a privilege. I'm humbled by it.
Wow. And if you can give me advice to a CEO watching this, what advice would it be? Any specific advice after interviewing so many of them? Advice you're like,
number 1, find your passion. Find what it is that you feel you were put on this earth to do. Think of what you love doing, what you love the most, and figure out how to do that. And in the beginning, you won't be able to do it on your own. So you have to partner. You have to work for someone else. You have to figure out other ways to do it. But you find what you love doing. And then the second part is something you and I have spoken about before, which is be a continuous learner. Everywhere you go, see that as an opportunity to learn what you could do. And if you're so fortunate that you have challenges in life, those are the secrets, because hidden beneath those challenges are the true treasures. And that's where you go for.
Wow, I think that's great. Well, I think like one of my last questions, as we are in the end of the podcast, is there any specific future events that are coming for the CEO Forum Group that the people should be in the watch out for?
Actually, if they are available on March 20th from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., we're bringing together for our Transformative CEO Summit. It's virtual, so you watch it on Zoom, and I'm bringing together about 20 top CEOs and top keynote speakers. And within just 2 hours, people have told me these are it's like a condensed Davos, but on steroids. They are able to just for 2 hours, watch, learn from CEOs, get their own ideas, figure things out. And so that's something I would welcome people to come to.
Awesome. And if someone is watching this and perhaps they want to reach out to you, or they want to, find where all of this is, what's like the best way to reach out to you or to the CEO Forum Group?
The easiest way is just go to ceoshow.com. And you'll probably even see things on there on the summit coming up, and I think that's the easiest way. Just do that.
Awesome, and I will also have here in the screen the social media, the website, and also on the description as well, so you guys can check out all the links. And wow, Robert, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you in this guest, and I hope you liked, now you being the one being interviewed.
I know that's a rarity for me, so I love it. Well done, Sebastian. You were a fantastic interviewer. You ask all the right questions, and I could tell that your heart is so much in this. You are doing a great service to all these people by sharing all of the terrific stories.
Well, thank you so much, Robert, and see you guys on the next one.